Merkabra.
And you can see
Yes.
on the screen Skatopia. Now, I've known you for a long time, online. Not personally, we haven't met yet. You did say you're doing a Seed 7 in person potentially. We'll see about this. But I've known you like through Facebook for I don't know how long, a long time, like been aware of you. And it was always through more of the, natural law community, because that's, I think, how I crossed your path. But then I saw over the years, like I'm seeing this Skatopia. Now, I personally don't skate. I did attempt it when I was younger and didn't stick with it. And, but I'm like, very interested in what you guys got going on over there. And it's like, what is this? And to me, it's like coming in from an angle. So to you, you're like, it's your life, right? To me, I'm like, what are these guys doing? Like, I have so many questions, who's organizing this? Is it unorganized, decentralized? Who orders the porta potties? Because that's a huge thing. Like, at these events, who's managing the bathroom and garbage situation? That's usually at least one thing that somebody has to nail for an event to be successful. And then there's everything else. But tell us about Skatopia.
I can give you a little breakdown. So Skatopia is a DIY skate park that my father and 50 other skateboarders came together to create, specifically to get away from all the oppressive regulations and the oppressive state, because they were having issues setting up skateboard parks in their backyards on rental properties or just in properties in general, specifically in the cities, but even in the rural areas, it became an issue. So people just wanted to get away, have a spot that they could, go out, have fun, be loud, express their freedoms without, harming anybody else, and build stuff. And so, eventually my dad and many others got together and kind of got this moving. And it kind of just organically took root from that. I don't think there was any intention of like Skatopia becoming a thing for a long time. But the way it's been organized, mainly my dad has been the pinnacle, which is on the screen right now. He's been the pinnacle of organization up to the point of his TBI, so his traumatic brain injury that he had back in, I believe it was 2009 or 10. And he, from there, I had to step in with many others. So we had to start co-organizing this operation. And, there was a documentary on Netflix. We've been on Tony Hawk's Underground 2. We have a level on that. We've been on Viva La Band, been on the cover of Rolling Stones. We've got an article in Rolling Stones magazine, been on Real TV, Blue Torch, all kinds of media back in the 2000s. After his TBI, things really slowed down because he was the real driving willpower for this operation, and dealing with somebody with such a, he's had 6 brain surgeries. So dealing with that became the main priority, but obviously keeping the legacy alive as best as possible. So currently the way we organize, because of my dad's diminished condition, is I have a team that I work with. They're from all over the country, some from Chicago, some from Texas, just all over the place, booking agents, and organizational agents. And we rent the property out so people can organize these events. And then, we just kind of host it from there, right? So they become the host, but we're just cooperating with that. And so as far as your question about the Porta Johns, actually my dad ordered the Porta Johns this year.
Nice.
And yeah,
very important.
He usually
very
does.
Important.
So absolutely. We always have kept up with that. And, it saves us too, not just for the community, but we don't want to be walking through our property and cleaning up hoop and stuff, when there's about 1,000 people at the
Yeah,
property.
you don't want to
obviously.
upset those people. I
Yeah.
know this from
No,
I know this from
not at
somewhat
all.
personal experience. You want to keep a good relationship with the Porta John Company.
Yes, yes. And we've had
Overpay.
a great relationship. That's one thing my dad was really good at before his TBI was business relationships. So he always was a very charismatic and very upfront and direct person. And he knew how to work with people in the business arena. And that's why we've been around for 30 years now. So we just had our 30th anniversary back in June. And yeah, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing feat.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because it was never associated with anarchism. My dad is not an anarchist. He has borderline anarchist tendencies, but when the documentary came about, they decided somehow I was young, so somehow it got associated with anarchy, obviously because it was just kind of wild and chaotic, and people could do pretty much whatever they wanted without harming other people, obviously. Without transgressing against anybody else's autonomy and boundaries. But there's a lot of risk with that. So we've taken a lot of risk, and we're still here. So it has to stay something. But everybody always comes to me and asks, "Is Skatopia an example of anarchism?" And I will tell you, no, it is not an example of anarchism. It is not a state of anarchy. It got associated with the documentary to being the 88 acres of anarchy, and kind of like a tagline for the film. I, however, was raised libertarian and anarchist with my father, and I spent a great deal reading a lot of literature very, very early on. And that was one of the things. I was homeschooled. So my dad, he was a single parent and he homeschooled me, and he made sure to have the right books at the right time. And he really drilled a lot of these principles into my head. And I had access to even deep esoteric knowledge, such as Manly P. Hall's work, very, very early on. So, living in the country and playing outside all the time, not having the internet and things like this, I just naturally was drawn to reading constantly. It was such a important part of my livelihood and my consciousness at that point. So I would just read everything that he had, and he had Karl Marx, he had anarchist literature, he had esoteric literature, he had political stuff, all over the board. And so I just assimilated all this knowledge over the years out there as I was, developing my skills as a skateboarder as well, because I was a professional skateboarder for about 25 years. And, and then it just spawned into what I am now, you could say. And eventually I came across Mark Passio's work, which then solidified everything that I was raised on and really kicked me in the ass and got me activated and empowered myself from that knowledge that I gained from him. And it was like when I found Mark Passio, which was through Douglas Martin, and he found him through David Whitehead, actually.
Interesting.
At that point, at that point,
I've had David on and I plan to have him on again soon, but I've interviewed him.
Oh, good. I love
so that's an interesting. It's always like little interesting circles that come back in these areas.
Right. It's so wild. So at that point, I had watched Kymatica and Zeitgeist, Esoteric Agenda, and all that stuff, back in the mid to late 2000s, obviously. And so then I got self-empowered from that and actualized, and everything Mark was talking about was everything that I had already learned. And in general, there's a lot of things that I wasn't familiar with, especially with the intricacies and the methodologies of the dark occult in general. So he helped to solidify a lot of the education that I had already gained throughout my studies, my autodidactic years, into these things. And so it just solidified. And then I started to get interested in it. He was a part of and hosting the Free Your Mind conference, and that inspired me to do the Seed conference from that, which took place at Skatopia, and then eventually it spawned out of there and grew into what it is today, which you have graciously helped out with, which is amazing, and we thank you greatly for that.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. There was a lot you brought up there. Thanks for talking about you growing up and your dad and Skatopia. I definitely want to see this. I want to bring my son out there someday and show him what can be done. You guys are building like I didn't have these pictures pulled up and ready, but people can go look even recently, like at because you guys just had the event in June.
Mhm.
These structures, like I forget what the word you use, like it's some kind of like a kind of free open building, or people are coming in and making these ramps and skate park, adding to it and things. I mean, how does this process work? Is it sort of just people show up and do the work? Or are you commissioning people to do the work? I mean,
It's a bit of both. In general, it's a lot of voluntary labor. Um, Usually people come in and they want to be a part of something and they have skills and they just want to assist, and they see that, maybe something needs some work on it, or maybe they have an idea that they want to bring to the table that other people can benefit from. That's kind of how the skateboarding community has always been, though. You kind of just get together with your friends, and then somebody has some plywood, somebody has some nails and a hammer, and next thing you know, you're building something together. And it's just organically grown out of that. But there's been a lot of commission work, a lot of service providers. Like recently, we just had the new stairs. Well, the old stairs tore down, which that was voluntary tearing them down, but we rebuilt them with local contractors that have been coming out for many years, and they also graciously donated a little bit of their time and resources to that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have met our budget. So it's very cooperative in that sense and very voluntary. As far as like the facilities and stuff, the main facility was, I think it's like an over 120-year-old barn, which is where the first skate bowl was built. And then from there, it just kind of kept, growing and growing and growing, and more people just kept coming out and wanting to donate. And yep, so that it's just kind of taken root from there. Some people just come, and some people work in concrete companies, and they got leftover, resources, and they donate them. And we get a lot of donations as far as resources, with wood, and then my dad, he has a kind of a methodology for going around to places that need to be torn down and things like this, and they'll go out and they'll tear down stuff and bring it back in. And he does a lot of recycling out there to help keep the place afloat as well. And so we're bringing in stuff and taking stuff out like constantly.
yeah. And that part of the country just like more is a lot older than where I'm at. I'm out here and like there's still like cowboy structures, up, and it's pretty hillbilly podunk. I don't know, but and it sounds like you're out in the country too. But it's like I've been on the East Coast. It's just older. Like there's just more stuff probably around
Yeah.
to utilize.
Yeah, there's a lot. And a lot of the facilities and buildings and things like that have broken down, obviously. So, and somebody's always looking for somebody else to come in and take their junk out of their yard. And usually a lot of times there's some value in that junk. And we just try to recycle that. You could call us recyclers. Now, I'm not hands-on with a lot of that. I tend to stay within my realm of skills. So I tend to just kind of help out with my dad's goal and legacy, the best I can from the back end, financial organization, booking, talking to people, advertisements, stuff like that. So yeah, I try to, just let him do his thing and let people experience that with him. And he also has one of the biggest skateboard museums in the world as well, which I grew up with in my house. Like we never had usually we didn't have a room like a living room. It was just skateboards all over the walls and all over the floors stacked,
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting.
It's so awesome. I mean, this is an awesome legacy, this Skatopia, and this piece of property, and your dad and what he's done, and you carrying on the torch. It's an amazing story. And like I said, that it's a part of you that I've like come to know after like knowing a different side of you that wasn't that. So like probably in your life that's not the case, right? With the people that you spend time with, understand like what you're all about and everything. But so
in general,
that's why I kind of wanted to talk to you about it first thing, get started talking about that, because
that's good. I'll add one more thing. Skatopia is kind of a big experiment, and the thing that I want to do with it is just like what anybody should want to do: learn the lessons from the past and grow and do better in the future, right? And so that's kind of what I've been trying to bring to the table. The main difficulties with running anything like this is usually the state of mind and the consciousness level of the individuals that attend or the people who are helping to co-create that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, for example, my dad's actually really hard to organize with because of his deteriorating condition, because his TBI is pretty severe. And so it can be quite difficult. And so it's not all love and good and all this stuff. We've had our problems just like any festival has, and we just learn and do the best we can. The cool thing is that the community tends to be unified on very simple things. Someone gets hurt, they're all there trying to help. Someone's causing trouble, they're immediately jumping in and trying to mitigate anything like that. So yeah, it's quite an interesting upbringing, you could say, because there's not many people, if any at all, that has ever grew up in the way that I have. Not that we've all grown up in a similar way, but this is pretty extreme, the way that I definitely grew up. And a lot of people tend
Mm-hmm.
to try to attack me and be like, oh, you only believe in freedom, or how I would call it, anarchism, because you grew up in that kind of environment.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, well, then how do you take into account all the other anarchists in the world that didn't grow up in that environment that still have the same principles and morals that I do and ideas that I do?
Right.
It doesn't hold up, but it just helps solidify it.
And the word itself, I know where you're coming from, because we work together. We've come
Yes.
from the same mentors. We understand that the meaning of the word may be dual, or one way in people's
Mhm.
minds or another way in people's minds. And I understand you're really doing a lot of work to correct that problem with the word itself,
Yes.
and you're actually looking to do more work in that area. So we can get more into that. It's like silly to have to be like, well, hold on a minute, let's define words, what we're saying here. But that is a very important
No, it's
part
fine.
of this arena. Very, very important. But like to your points there about the organization of somewhat more anarchistic, and maybe the folks in it don't wear the label, but they're more freedom oriented. They're very, anti-authoritarian, not just because a chip on
Mhm.
their shoulder, but more principle based in some people. But then other people may be just looking to have a good time. Other people are looking to have an all out rave and, take as much drugs as possible and stay up all night. So I've been in these scenarios. I don't know if that's the case for Skatopia. I don't want to put anything that's not
Sometimes.
true out there, but it's fine to have the vision and what the idealistic view of what it's supposed to be. Somebody might even create the event with that intention. In this case, it sounds like you're sort of more steering it, the best you can without trying to take complete control of everything that goes on.
Yes.
But so I've been close to events like this, and it's like you said, it's like the assholes are the ones that cause the problem.
Yes.
There's someone that's going to come and screw it up, and it's how you handle that fallout and recover from there. And like you said, now we have to try to work and get better every year, and don't let the assholes ruin such an awesome thing, because they can
Yes.
easily. Good on you guys for keeping it going, because it can fall apart, and then people don't want to be involved if they're seeing this, and then they leave. And then it's usually the assholes that stick around too. So
Yes.
it's like
Yes, it
how do you
can be.
deal with that? Is there like a charter? Is there rules? Like, don't be an asshole is a great rule. How do you enforce it?
Usually it's simply through the principle of self-defense. If somebody starts to transgress, we just step in, or the individual who's being transgressed upon, steps up and defends themselves. And usually people come to their aid, because it's kind of interesting. If you allow people for their conscience to operate properly, then usually people will step in when their conscience kicks in, and that is kind of what I've noticed is, people do have this understanding of this sense of objectiveness when it comes to morality. And they do have this sense of, hey, like this needs to stop, obviously, immediately, by whatever means necessary. And so it's really nice to see that. At times, if we have to bring in the community, or some of the people that are, organizing the stuff to deal with the situation. Usually, whenever someone steps out of line, though, they're always cooperative. I've had a few people where I've had to ban them, and they're completely like, "Yeah, I fucked up. Can't come back." And they tried to seek restitution for the community. Bring restitution. I mean, for the community. A lot of the times, the community is not receptive, but it just depends. But mostly people are really receptive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Restitution.
They tend to be receptive whenever they step out of line and you're like,
make
hey,
that guy go over and work on some mortar over here. Or
yeah.
He's got to
right.
redo the stairs. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had to kick plenty of people off the property and they leave willingly, and sometimes that's just because of a perceived hierarchy or a sense of force, right? Like, for example, I'm not a big guy, but they know that if you fuck with me, I have an army behind me. So you better be ready,
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, I mean, and that sounds like, well, weren't you just saying anarchy and da-da-da? Like, doesn't mean like in a private scenario like this where it's someone's property and you've been invited into an event, private or public, like there has to be people that are taking accountability for chaos and trying to restore order. And it sometimes involves force. Like in one scenario, there was a guy in a situation like this that had to be tied to a tree for the time being.
Right.
And everybody was okay with that solution at that time.
At that time. We've never done that. So but it solved the problem, and right.
And then the guy was able to sober up, which was the issue, I think, in this case. So yeah, that's an interesting experiment in itself, and this is multiple times a year. You guys are getting together, and it's sort of like as you're planning these events. It's not an annual necessarily thing.
No, it is annual.
Okay.
We have them twice a year. Well, there's 3 events. One, April Fools. That's the preparation event.
Okay.
So it's called the work party. So people come out and work. And then in June, we have our annual Bowl Bash, which has been going on. We just had our 30th. And then in October, it's fluctuated with the time period, but my dad's birthday is on November 1st. So he tends to do it on Halloween weekend or somewhere close to that. So yeah, we've been doing that for 30 years. But other than that, most of the time, there's very few people out there. Just a couple skaters, a couple local people. Like right now, we got a guy from Israel staying there. He's actually Ukrainian who moved to Israel and now is in the United States.
He's moving around all the war zones, huh?
Yeah, right. I know. Isn't that wild? But he's an interesting character and he's been there for a while. And we get people from all over the world, they've come and they usually stay, until they can't stay anymore. So we'll have like a local crew, probably 3 to like 5 people, sometimes more, maybe like 10. And they stay throughout the active seasons. And then it reduces in the inactive seasons, being the winter, because it's really hard out there in the winter, obviously. But it's cool. A lot of people come and help, and it's usually just peaceful. Like if you come out there today, it's just going to be a couple guys, maybe working on a couple things. Nothing's going crazy, no parties, no nothing like that. Just skating and working. So, and probably watching the butterflies or something.
That sounds pretty nice, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so how's fatherhood treating you?
Fatherhood is one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. That's for sure. My little boy is just over 6 months now, and he is just an amazing little guy. Always so happy, so social. He loves being in nature, and for me, it's been revolutionary as far as my maturity and as far as just the absolute sacredness of life itself, which I already held life itself very highly because of the principles that I have. But it's definitely something that's hard to put into words to express like how grateful I am and the kind of experience I've had with this amazing little sentient being that's growing up in my care.
Oh yeah, there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing like it for me, personally. So I'll just speak personally. So yeah, that's a transformative time. And it doesn't stop. There's like dad strength that kicks in. So now you have the superpower of dad strength.
Right.
It adds another level to like what you can withstand and withhold. Now you're like thinking about things differently, or at least for me anyway.
Yes.
It really opened up my longer term thinking. Not that I wasn't thinking about the future before I became a father, but to then have to be financially responsible for this other thing and these other people, and think about their future, and then think about like the programming. And then at that point, if you haven't, like your child's pretty young, I'm sure you've been around a lot of children, but anything you haven't figured out yet, if you spend a lot of time around children, as far as like personal problems that you have that you haven't worked through, will quickly come out and be like, I call it like amplified. It's not just a reflection, it's like an amplification. And you're like, I thought I had this handled. And, I think this comes a little later when you're dealing with the toddler phase.
Right. Yeah.
Right now, like you don't have a lot to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully, my partner is an amazing mother. And this is what I always tell people. I've become more and more active as the months went on, but mainly assisting her at this moment,
exactly.
And just relieving her as much as possible from all the pressures of motherhood. But we have a very good dynamic, very good routine, and it's been, an amazing journey. And I'm excited and ecstatic for what's to come, obviously. And I've heard that, that it will bring to the table, your own insecurities, your own flaws, more shadow work that you need to do, obviously, that it will start to unravel. And, I'm also, I like doing that kind of work. A lot of people don't, but I've conditioned myself to be like, yes, I'm ready to, enhance the quality of my being, and whatever needs to happen for me to do that, then let it happen. I will deal with that when it comes. So I'm ready for that. As far as mentally, who knows? You can always say from the current state of consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride either way, I'm sure. Like when you were...
Yeah, my friends keep saying, well, just wait till he rebels against you and then he becomes like some politician.
That's it, I mean, we don't want to like guide a child into like doing what we think they should do, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Unless you see something in them that you really can see, like, okay, I need to push this forward with this child. Like, I think that's what you're looking for. At least that with the way we're going, that's what we're looking for. We're trying to, self-directed, unschooling, whatever label you want to put on it. Yes. That's the other thing, is like you can try to throw these models at the situation, and it helps to have framework. But like you've been talking about with Skatopia and everything else, is like you got to adapt. And then turn around the next day and get better and grow and learn. And you're not going to show up an expert. You're not going to just be an expert from a book or someone telling you this is one of those. You've got to do it every day. Be engaged. Don't, just outsource it to somebody else if you want to be a parent that's there. Like I am, like within the same perimeter of my children all the time. They might see me working a lot, but I like to be a part of their lives as much as I can. So I tried to structure my life so that I could be that when I finally did have kids. And yeah, the self-directed thing is the point I was getting at, is that we're really looking for that. What is it that this kid has that we need to feed? And then we're going to feed it. And so that's our job, is to feed the vision that they hold inside themselves and help them work out what that is and bring it out, and also learn how to, put it into motion. Because these are all tools that I think are just as important as the memorization bullshit that they teach you in the public schools, right? Yes. Like, this is more important. We need to learn how we learn, and then how to get our thoughts out personally, because everybody's a little different in this way. I did want to talk to you about that, like your process, like when you were a child. It sounds like your parents were pretty, creating an environment. You said you read a lot of books, so obviously you had an environment where you were able to do that. Were you
Yes.
drawing? Were you painting? You're very creative now in your work that you put out. The content anyway is very artistic. It's not just so plain Jane. You there's an extra notch, an extra many notches there of creative essence. And so, is this something from childhood that you've been into? Do you have to cultivate that skill?
Yes, it definitely developed through my childhood. I was very artistic. I had boxes of my art, at my dad's house, and I used to be very hands-on too. I like to build things. In fact, in my mid-teens to like early 20s, I was building sculptures for a long time, like junk sculptures. So I'd just find junk, and then because I could weld, I would just weld things together, and the next thing I know, I have this, dragon that I've been working on for months and months, and and then eventually sell it to somebody. I used to do flowers too out of shovel heads, which was pretty cool. Just like rims from cars, and then shovel heads and poles and stuff, and I would sell those for a while. But yeah, I was always very artistic. I had people around me that facilitated the creative side of my consciousness, which wasn't just my parents. In fact, it was usually my father's friends, because they were working with publishing tools such as Photoshop, or even 3D graphic design programs such as like Poser, Brace 3D, things like that I used to get into back in my youth. And there was a lot of different things like that, but I was very hands on for a long time before I got into the graphic design side of stuff. And yes, it kind of just flows through me because I've always tapped into the right brain aspect, you can say, the sacred creativity, the sacred feminine principle, and tried to channel that into something and create something that was inspiring myself and others. I really enjoyed to bring something to people and make them happy and make them, enjoy life a little bit better, obviously. And it was just an expression of my freedom too, because I had a very open environment. I wasn't very confined with rules and regulations and stuff like this. My dad was very, very open with my ability to test and go through things, and he wasn't very fear based with stuff. So he wasn't always trying to overprotect when I was a child, right? And that allowed me to express myself and to learn things in nature, which is really, I think, one of the proper ways to learn is by learning from actual experiences, not just verbally, right? But we can learn a lot from the experiences of others as well. And so Skatopia allowed me to learn a lot of the principles that I have under my belt now, including the ideas of natural law and seeing the social dynamic, the sociology, along with the ideological aspects of people running around me with this environment, allowed me to, watch them and watch them like, hey, do something successful. How did they get to that level? I want to do that too. I want to be successful in that. I want to enhance my skills. And so I would just follow the basis, right? I would follow a methodology to understand like what the cause of that was to get to that effect. And then I just put that into my own behavioral, axiom, and then I would go out and do that. Really, what I was doing is just understanding the laws of creation, the law of manifestation, the scientific method, understanding, how to actually create things in the world. And I think that's very vital for all of us. But it does take the environment, because if you're too overprotective, you're too oppressive, if you control people too much, then you're stifling their creativity, their ingenuity, their imagination, and you're just making a dull puppet. You're literally creating a slave. That's really what you're doing, because that's honestly probably what you want if you have that kind of mindset. You don't really want a free being as a child or anything like that. You just want a slave. That's it, because you're stuck in the master slave relationship. And I was lucky enough to not have that. My dad never beat me either. So that was a very great benefit as well for my neurodevelopment.
Yeah, and it's like the world is set up against us right now with all the distraction, and in general, but and then you pointed out very well the point that the parent may very well want to be the authority figure that just gets a well-programmed response when they bark the order. And that's one thing. It's like the easy tool, right? That's the easier tool. It's definitely like the lazy way, although it feels like the more like powerful and what you should do, and this is how it needs to be done. Make the child do what you say at that point in time. But that's kind of what I was talking about, is like, that's going to come up every day. Those situations will be there for you to explore how you're going to handle it. And if you're going to just use the shorter, let's just do what I say version versus like a negotiation, I can't say that I'm not, sometimes just saying like, look, you need to listen to me and what I'm saying right now. This is very important. Like whatever's going on, like you need to hear what I'm saying, and say it in a way that it's sort of, heard forcefully, however you want to say. But a lot of the time you can use more of a negotiation, is what I call it. Everything's up for negotiation. And I try to teach my kids this, which makes it a lot harder for all of us. And, it makes it so we have to then sit and discuss. And I point out to my daughter, who's this comes up with the most, is like, it's okay for you to like say what you'd rather have, or like, instead of just hearing the no and then that's it, and now it's just a yes versus a no and we're going to argue it out, there's always some other way to handle the problem or the situation if we just talk it out and try to get what we still want, but negotiate. That's how it works as adults. So it's like, why wouldn't why wouldn't we just teach our kids to do it that way versus the programming that I received, because I didn't grow up necessarily like you, and my parents weren't big into like programming me about authoritarianism, but it was from the public school and the religion side. So I had those two working for you just do what we say. That's why, we'll have questions though. Yeah, but it's just what it says and what we say. This is how we interpret the text. That's how it is. Right. Kind of thing. And I always was like, I don't know about that. But yeah, so it creates more work as a parent to have to actually, have an open dialogue with your child about, because the things they want are like, what is it going to be? It's going to be like dessert, screen time, treats, fun time doing this for you to do. These aren't big things, but if you're just going to say no, and because I said so, eventually they're going to take that in. They're like, okay, I guess there's some things that you just give up on, and that's it. And that's
right.
As an adult, you could act like that, and you probably live the rest of your life like that. There's systems set up for you to go be like that, and it'll work out probably just fine for you in that little cocoon of safety and slavery. Because it's there, it's set up like that. So being a free thinking person who can question things and negotiate for their needs and their desires, and then learn how to manifest actually like what it is you're here to do. These are all skills that you can learn, right? But they're not taught to people in the public indoctrination system for sure. This is stuff that's like, might as well call it esoteric occultism, right? Just getting your thoughts out of your head properly, because they do not want us to do that. Doing something like this is something that is a psychological overcoming for some people that they have to work through. Like, what do I have to say? I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to sound dumb. And no one's given me permission to do this, kind of thinking. A lot of people are there. So right on that your parents created those spaces for you. And, having that space is very important. We have the technology so in our face now, but we came out to the country. We're still dealing with the technology thing, but at least we've created some space in other ways. So instead of the city noise, is just you combine that with the social media, with the screen time, and you really don't have time to explore yourself. So it sounds like growing up that you did have that time.
I definitely did. And with my assertion there, it doesn't mean that you don't like have a general use of force at some level. I just mean non-coercive force, non-duress. Don't hold your kids under duress. Don't use coercive force against them. And I like what you said. It's about having a dialogue, allowing them to grow and to understand why you are stating these things. Inspiring them to understand by teaching them how to think, not what to think, right? And I think that's very, very important, giving them the opportunity to grow rather than trying to force the outcome. Rather than a quality of opportunity, we want a quality of opportunity, right? Or a quality of outcome, we want a quality of opportunity. And you know, it sounds like you got the same country problems I have. Loud dogs.
Yeah.
Those
No,
are
they're
my
fine.
city noises. I
Yeah,
know.
they're doing
It's
their
funny.
job.
Yep, they are. That's what mine does all the time. It's really cute. But yeah, I'm super excited for it. And also, I'd like to be able to provide the things that I was not provided as well as a young adult. Even though I had a great foundation, there was a lot of things that was not provided as well. And there's a lot of things that I missed out on because of that, but also just because a lot of that knowledge wasn't to the forefront. The internet wasn't a big thing at that level, and no excuses for any of it. But the tools are still just now like in their baby phases, you could say. They're still developing in many ways, and the technology is still very early. Even currently, people think technology is so old because we've had it since we were kids and stuff, but really it's still in its adolescent phase, and we have no idea where it's really going to go. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited for it. And I think what you said was amazing on that.
No, yeah, we're not going to know like what is in 10 years. What I do now for a living to take care of my responsibilities is not something that was around when I was a kid for them to understand, to be like, this is what you're going to be looking forward to do, right?
Right.
And that was then, and now we're in a faster pace. So it's just, technology is not going anywhere. Well, it definitely could, but right now it's not, and it's the thing that's going to continue. That's sort of the decision I made for my career, was to go into technology, because I was doing like work like we were talking about earlier with my hands. I was building things. I did tile and would build showers and really enjoyed that work, but it didn't have the wheels to take me where I needed to go in life, and it didn't survive the 2008 crisis. Was not fun, and I had to make a lot of decisions around that time, and that's back when I came across a lot of the work and mentors that some of which you've mentioned here today, that have led me to be now using the skill set that I have to do work that I, again, never really considered myself to do. But as we both know, that there's a responsibility now to put ourselves out there, and this is the way that we're going to do that right now. It's not through, just mingling with the neighbors about what's going on in the world. We got to get the message out to a wider community. And so I really appreciate you accepting my offer to come on an interview that you weren't sure what we were going to talk about. You weren't sure why I was asking you to suddenly come on an interview. Now I did my episode with Will, and I sort of released this series out there that I'm going to be working on now for this foreseeable future. And this is my focus, to bring people on like yourself and highlight people that I would like more people to know about, right? So just act as a repeater and an amplifier with the skill set, with this particular vein of the project. And one of the things that I was able to learn a lot of these skills and then apply them and enhance them, because it was a little bit more of a pressure situation, was the Seed 5 conference. Seed 4, sorry. And Seed 4 is the number 4. So that means there was 3 before that. So how did you get started with the Seed conference? And tell us about Seed 1, and why did it turn into a virtual event? And what's
All
the
right.
future look like?
Yeah, the Seed Conference, like I said, was inspired by the Free Your Mind conference. And I was very disappointed, not only in the local community, in the skateboard community, in the music community that I'm involved with at Skatopia. So the main thing that I was seeing was just a lot of fake ass people who claimed that they wanted freedom, but did not have any of the skill base or any of the knowledge or the discipline or self realization or self actualization to manifest what they claim that they want. So they still are not, and they were not meeting the requirements to manifest this state of freedom that we're all striving for. At least I would hope that we're striving for. I don't think most of the world is striving for it, or we would have it actually. But so I was like, okay, I'm going to inject this knowledge directly into this community by creating an event that has nothing to do with the Bowl Bash or with the events that we have normally at Skatopia. And I was like, I'll call it Seed, kind of an open-end acronym. You know, I've dabbled with a bunch of different acronyms, but I just call it Seed. And it just spawned from there. So I had a few people, same kind of organizational things came about. I had a construction guy who had been working on the farm. He came in and built all the benches, and we worked on the stage and built a pew. And then I went out and you know, got some people to help with the financial aspects of getting a projector slide and a projector or a projector screen and a projector. And then, you know, started to obviously put everything together and trying to put the work out that I had started to do online, but in person, right? And that was the plan, was like, hey, I want to get in people's faces. I want to get people together, get people to organize and have unity, but also educate people. And then afterwards, you know, we could go skate. You know, so we have this awesome freedom-oriented conference, and you can go skate and do whatever you need to do on the farm, obviously. So it was a really cool platform for that. It worked out really well. The only downfall that I had really was that it was really cold. The two that I planned on doing it, I think the first one was the coldest. I think it dropped to like, I think it was in the 30s or something. I believe it was in the 30s, the first one. So we had to seal off the entire area where we had the conference, and people were literally in their blankets, huddled up, listening to these presentations, which were hours upon hours upon hours, you know, for 2 days. And it was kind of amazing that everybody stuck through it, despite how cold it was. We did have a heater in there, but it was pretty amazing to get that together. And then from there, I learned what I needed to do, you know, better. And I just wanted to enhance that. So Seed 2 came about, and I actually have a professional videographer, and he's from Nashville, Tennessee, and that's what he does. He goes out to these big events and, you know, runs the cameras and runs the audio and all this stuff. And he came in and helped me do all the audio and sound equipment. Now I have a lot of background in audio, running the music at Skatopia for the bands many times, also being a musician myself. So, you know, I've had a lot of knowledge in that area. So it was pretty easy to get together as far as that, because I already had a good foundation. And then from there, it just kept, you know, growing and unraveling. And another thing that I was motivated about. Yeah, well, it wasn't easy. I wouldn't say it was easy. It definitely wasn't easy, but
it plugged into what you already could do.
Yes. There was a lot of hard work involved, yep. But it wasn't as hard as some people make it out to be, I would say. But one of the other things is that Nathan and Douglas, they had a great amount of information, and they were on the same path that I was on at that point. So Nate runs the Cubbywhole podcast, and then Doug is a co-content creator on the Cubbywhole podcast as well, just like myself. And you know, I wanted to get them to put content out. That was one of my goals, was like, hey, because we kept talking, we had this kind of a back scene, you know, communication where we talked to each other all the time about all this stuff that we were learning and all this stuff that we knew about. And I was like, I want to get these guys activated and get their knowledge out on the table in a similar way that Mark and, you know, David Icke and Jordan Maxwell and Michael DeSarion, you know, all these people were putting their information out. And I was like, I want to get these people on the table. So this is a way that I could do that. And then it just influenced them. And now I look at like what Nathan has done, and I'm blown away with where he's gone with it. I think he would have eventually got to that, but I kind of just came in and kicked him in the ass with it. Like, hey, I'm doing this conference. You want to present at it? Yeah. And just kind of threw it in his lap. And yeah, really amazing.
There's a
And
Cubbywhole
from
on the
there,
screen for those with the audio or with the video version.
yeah, and I would highly recommend going through Nate Kapnicki's work. It's amazing. In fact, I would start at podcast number 1. I'm a co-host up to, I think, in the 40s on that podcast, and it's just absolutely amazing. He does beautiful presentations. His artistic style comes through so amazing, and he has a plethora of great information, especially into esoteric Freemasonry. But yeah, from there, it got more and more difficult to do it in person. And so my plan with Seed 4 was to actually host it at a university in Athens, Ohio. But that was right around the COVID, right before that. So I had all of it organized, everything, the room or the facility was rented, and everything was going. And then COVID came out, obviously, and it shut that conference down immediately. They wanted to take half my seats away. They wanted to mandate all kinds of crazy mandates, such as the mask mandate. And then they were even talking about cutting it down to 25% of the seats. And I was like, but not cutting the expense. The cost would still be the same. So they, were not doing that. So I had to cancel that. And then I decided to do it online, and had to organize all that to get this going. And that one was really, I feel like that was the one that really set it apart from all the other seed conferences, where it was very serious. We had a great lineup. It was online, so it was widespread. And in fact, I feel that being online is so beneficial because I learned a lot of this information from books, from podcasts, from videos, from documentaries, from, people who actually went out and put this work and published this work out into the world. So that was the benefit of that, was being able to get to a wide variety of people. And it kind of streamlines a lot of it as well, because there's a lot of expenses doing it in person. And as, Tyler had mentioned, I would hope to do the 7th one in the future, and then take a break after that on the Seed Conference, because my whole plan was to do the 7 stages of enlightenment pretty much through the seed, and it's correlated with the growth of the seed. So, the names are, like germination, growth, et cetera, sprout, things like that. And yeah, it organically grew, and it inspired Will and all kinds of other people to throw their conference together, the Funnel Conference. And it just kind of lit like a wildfire. And I was just blown away with the kind of reception and the kind of help. And in fact, you were talking about the kind of organic organization that takes place and the adaptability. Well, that's, this is an example of that. Like, we ran into tech issues, and we dealt with them. We learned from them. And Seed 5 was a home run, an absolute home run. And I think that was one of the best ones yet. And I can't wait to see where we go with that. That's for sure. And, the art on the screen right there, that's from Nate Cap. He does amazing esoteric artwork. And I'm so excited to keep the ball moving and keep it going. The only reason I haven't got it moving faster for Seed 6 is, been a lot of life changes going on. Got a new little boy, and it's been, pretty difficult to manage everything going on in my life and organize other events such as the ones at Skatopia. But it's not going anywhere, so don't worry. It's coming back. It's coming. I think about it constantly.
Well, that's good to know. I know it feels like there's a lot of pressure, but I think that the timing is right. And, we have to work with the timing sometimes. The timing sometimes doesn't go exactly how we want it to go, but it ends up working out. And the timing with these seed conferences, as they've worked with my life, is usually like a time of like great transformation for me. So I have to like make sure I'm keeping my computer on office setup together well enough to be able to do the task. Well,
Right,
usually
right.
my life is swirling around me at the time, like I said. So I just got this set up. We'll see if I can stick to this for a while in this room right here. And I'm planning on upgrading my hardware and getting some better internet redundancy in place. At which point, I may feel more confident to do something like seed again, because it's like when you agree to do that, you're also agreeing that your system is in top condition, that your internet is stable, that your schedule is looking open. And if some of those things aren't exactly the case, I'm like, okay, let me see what Brandon's timing looks like on this, because yeah, I feel you, man. I mean, the things that come up for me are, it takes some focus, and I've had to refocus back to putting priorities as the focus. And when you do that, it really helps kind of demystify all the other shit that you thought you had to do that was important. Um, just a little tip out there for people: prioritize what you want to do early in the day, every day.
Right,
That
right.
way you win.
Yeah. Another cool thing about putting the presentations together was that I learned a great deal by doing the work itself. So by getting into the output phase, by getting into the rhetoric, by getting hands on, right? You'll be surprised because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know enough or I don't feel confident enough. Just start working on the project and see where it goes, because I guarantee that you'll have great, gain from that. You'll gain a lot from that. So the more and more that I've done the work during the process, I've gained a lot more knowledge and a lot more skills by doing that. And I think that's one of the big shadow work things people need to work on is, just kind of like throwing themselves in the deep end a little bit. They really just need to get over the fear and the anxiety that they have and just dive in, just jump in and don't worry, we've all been through it and we can help you, if people reach out. I don't mind trying to help people with certain things, obviously, if I have the time and the capability to do that. And there's plenty of other people out there that will come to your aid, but the biggest aid will be the universe. The universe will show you the path. It will show you the lessons that you need to learn, and it will give you the consequences of your own actions, of what you're putting into it. And I think that's very important to understand is, getting out there and just starting it and kind of going with the flow and being adaptable. But I learned a lot by starting to do presentation work and just starting to build slides, and it helps with the memory as well, to be able to retain the information by reading it over and over and over and reprogramming yourself and learning how to in a way, learning how to debate all these dogmatic arguments with people, but also being
Mm-hmm.
creative. It's fun. There's a fun side to it. It's not fun needing to do it, but there is a fun side being creative.
Yeah. Yeah, and you go from the level of like getting frustrated with someone at the grocery store or your neighbor or some person you work with, and well, they just don't understand. Well, maybe it's the way you're communicating. Maybe you have a lot of work to do in how you're presenting the message and building the bridge in order to be able to transfer that kind of a payload across to somebody. A lot of people don't like to just be abruptly confronted with some information, and from someone who seems like they're coming from like some place of superiority. This is not how you're going to be effective. I guess it can be. It can be. And if you're like persistent and you just aren't going to stop with that method, there's going to be people that'll hear you out. But like, okay, so this bridges into, I think, something I had noted. I trying to just have a conversation, but I also have notes because I'm one of those people. I have to prepare, and I can't just go into something without notes. So even the way the conversation though goes with my notes pretty well. The symbolic literacy, I think, is something that people lack. That's my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, and if that's the case, what could we do to help bridge the gap for symbolic literacy, which will then help do what we just said, which is create a stronger bridge to be able to then transfer the payload across. Without symbolic literacy, you're over here trying to explain the occult, trying to explain symbolism, and the person over here is like illiterate from this language. It's like you're speaking Latin to them, right?
Yes.
I know that because I used to be that way. And so to make that transfer is not exactly easy. You don't just explain to somebody, well, a triangle is this, although that's kind of where I started, is like, okay, an upward facing triangle in the occult world means this, really basic stuff. But
Right.
then eventually it opened up to where I'm like, oh my God, like I'm seeing a world now that I didn't see before. Wasn't visible before, and now it's everywhere. So it took a long time to get through that, but I know your work revolves around this topic. So how do we get people to be symbolically literate?
I think one of the best ways is to find something that they're interested in, something that they have a great deal or they spend a great deal of attention on. So, movies is a great example, So, I like to talk to people about movies. And usually I'll keep it as simple as possible for them, like what you were just talking about. But yes, sometimes it is just like telling them, like, hey, the upward facing triangle also corresponds to a blade, and it's a piercing symbol, which also corresponds to the masculine energy of consciousness, because masculine energy is also thrusting or piercing, which also can correlate to the phallus, right? You need to be able to, first of all, understand the level of consciousness a person is coming from. So you yourself have to be good at analyzing people, and then try to meet them on their level, just like you would a child, and simply explain these things in a manner that they find interest in it, and they are in that awe state of consciousness, so that they want to go and do their diligence into it and explore it further. Because really, all I'm doing is showing you the path. You're the one who's walking down it. You're the one who has to do all the work. I can tell you all this stuff, but you have to walk down that path and explore these symbols themselves and see what you can pull out of them. And symbols, to me, are one of the foundational languages of the universe. So we're naturally in tune with symbolism all around us. And the law of correspondence, the Hermetic principle or law of correspondence, it's just that we dull it out and it becomes programmed out of us. But at some level, some of us are still using it. And as an example of this, if you talk to a modern gamer or a Marvel buff, they will readily know what an Easter egg is, right? But they don't understand the esoteric significance of the Easter egg. But the concept, the principle of an Easter egg is esoteric itself. It is a hidden idea or a hidden form of an allegory within some form of symbolism, within some art or media or something that you happen to be looking for. So, like in a video game, you're looking for the Easter egg to gain the achievement, right? So, you can train yourself to do these things. You can learn pattern recognition and symbolic literacy by starting to identify ubiquitous nature or parallels within the symbolism itself, and trying to look at these things from a holistic perspective rather than just a left brain, linear perspective. So you have to get into the holistic aspect where you're looking at two things simultaneously and saying, how do these things relate? What's the ubiquitous nature of these things? How are these things very similar? Because you're trying to find the similarities. And by doing so, you'll also find where they're not similar. And then you can negate the things that are not similar, right? So a process of apophatic deduction, right? So you're getting rid of the negative to understand what something is, or you're looking at the positive to understand what something is not, right? So it's an interesting thing. For me, it's usually coming from the right brain. So people in the left brain are very, very hard to get through with correlative thinking. But here's an example. Understand what their level is. If they're a mathematician, talk to them about math, talk to them about the numbers and how the numbers are meaning something, right? And then you say, hey, the numbers are just symbols. And now we can break down more equations because we understand these symbols. So they use symbolism within their own formula. If you're talking to an engineer, oh man, engineers, not the greatest at what they do, but I'll tell you what, they have some crazy pattern recognition when they get activated. I know one myself. Actually, I know a few, but I know a few. And the one that I'm thinking of, man, when he activated on his symbolic literacy, when he was designing like cars and stuff like this, he kept coming back to me constantly, like, look, you told me this, and it's in this design that I made for this, this gear ratio, and it's right here. And I'm like, yeah, this is organically how it's going to manifest, and it's really good that you're going to see that. Another thing is that symbols, the more that you raise your consciousness and then you go back to the symbol that you looked at before, you're going to have an unfoldment of more meaning. So at one point in your life, one stage of your consciousness, a circle may have just represented a simple circle or a 360. And then you come back many years later after you've gained some experience and you've done some due diligence into these things, and it's going to mean holism. It's going to mean infinity, completion, and it could be the sacred feminine womb, could be curvature, all kinds of different things that's going to unfold from that. Maybe a lot of stuff in the math of the circle. So, it could be the Knights of the Round Table, which I feel is extremely important. But, there's a lot to it. And that's the powerfulness of symbolism, is that it will continue to unfold as you continue to evolve, as you raise yourself, as you ascend, as you enhance your consciousness and you become more aware and you gather more understanding of yourself and the world around you. You're going to be able to relate those things back to other things. And that's what consciousness does. We are always constantly relating and comparing things, contrasting them one from another, and that's a natural process of what we do. So I think that's one thing. I think the main thing I would say with it is just understand where people are at and then try to approach them at their own level and not bombard them with too much, because it can be overloading. And then you kind of look like a schizophrenic or something. And you don't want to look like a schizophrenic to people you're trying to teach.
Well, so you mean it's not just about conspiracy and what they put in movies and films and, because this is what people think that are sort of not initiated is now, oh, well, I'm exposed to that. I've seen this stuff on Facebook, about the Illuminati or what they do at the Super Bowl. Is that the symbolism you're talking? It's like, yes, we do need to understand it to understand what our enemy is saying, because that's what they speak a lot of the time to us, is through symbolic language. And that way they've kind of told you what they're doing. And if you're not interpreting it, so that's a big aspect of it. But I think that's missing the point of mostly what you just said. And so people are like, well, I want to hear about the symbolism so I can understand what they're doing to us, and what's on this product that I bought. Look at the symbolism there. But this is like something like, okay, graduating above that. We're talking about something that is actually can be quite transformative in your own life as you go down the layers of how to use them personally, even in just meditation and thinking about symbols, even while meditating, can be an experience in itself. I don't know how to explain it, because it's something you'd have to explain through symbolism mostly and get people to open up through that. But you know what I mean? There's levels of understanding. Symbolic literacy is just like becoming literate in a language like English. There's people that are living in Alabama in the swamp. No offense to those folks, but they speak a lot differently than someone who's really taken their time to pronounce every syllable correctly and incorporate a lot of different vocabulary and not use a lot of slang words like I do, and lots of ums and buts and uhs. You can see the difference and you can feel the difference, and then that person has a different experience in life as well. And they're actually typically going to be able to achieve more of what they want and what they're attempting to do in life based on the way that they've graduated their language. Well, it's the same thing here. So we're not really talking about anything different. And so why do the dark occult rulers of the world use symbology? Because they're successful in their mission of what they're doing, and they're really talented in what they do. So they understand the multiple facets of the mind is not just as simple as most people are thinking. And so that's one reason to open up this literacy in ourselves, is because it opens up your consciousness. It opens up your mind to be able to understand our world better and yourself, which is probably the most important thing in the whole discovery, right? For me, this is all speaking from personal experience. I'm not trying, let's pull out some studies, let's get some scientific studies. Okay, yeah, I'm being very, just generally speaking from my experience. But then we're looking at the work you're doing, like beyond the hidden veil, beyond the forbidden veil. Let me get it correct. And what a great example of helping people along this path and understanding the occult. In the same vein, you've brought up words like anarchy several times. A lot of people in my audience, probably that's fine. Do you want to help us understand more what you mean when you say the occult? Are you talking about ritual magic here? Are you talking about drum circles? And what do you mean, by... What is your thoughts on the occult and how to bridge the gap between my joking around and what people are going to think we're talking about versus what it actually is?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that, yes, symbolism is a language, right? And that language is an inherent property of the universe. For an example of that, whenever we see a cloud that's dark coming over the horizon, maybe from the west usually, we can symbolically understand that it could represent rainfall. And then within that, it can become more complex. So symbolism comes from a simplicity into a more complexity. And as the symbolic forms become more complex, it becomes harder and harder and harder for us to make sense of the essence of what that symbol actually means. So usually in the modern world, we're dealing with very, very complex forms and very, very complex symbols. And so many people don't, consciously can go back to its root, go back to the causality, to the essence of what that symbol actually means. So that's why I try to focus on the very, very simple symbols and then build the foundation of what those actually mean and what those actually are, and then work from there. And I think that's one thing that we're not taught. We are taught that a little bit when we're working with shapes and things like that physically as children, but we're not taught about the concept of what a symbol actually is, right? Whether that's metaphysically or physically, because there are two levels to it. But in the occult realm, and the word occult simply means hidden, and it's in reference to hidden knowledge. So the word occult is derived from the Latin adjective oculus or occultus, and it means hidden from sight. So oculus means eye, and it also comes from the word occultare. So that also means hidden as well. To hide, to conceal, to keep secret, right? And so this in turn is talking about something hidden from sight, but it's not just physical sight, it's also spiritual sight. It's talking about something that is hidden spiritually. It's talking about something that is intentionally hidden, but also not intentionally hidden. So the occult can be both simultaneously. It doesn't have to be something that I'm like taking and hiding in my room or withholding from you. That is part of it, but it's not just exclusively that. So as an example of something that is not part of that context of the occult, we can look at nature again. When we look at a tree, the tree doesn't come out and give you blueprints, just readily tells you how it operates. The knowledge of how it operates is occulted. It is hidden from us, and we have to use a process of discernment, a process of pattern recognition, a process of problem solving as well, to understand how the tree operates. And then by doing so, we build a system, a model from that to understand, let's say it's an apple tree, to understand its whole process, its whole cycle, all the way up from seed to fruition to be able to use that knowledge, that science, to get the fruit from that thing. But the knowledge of that is hidden naturally in nature, and that is occulted. And so we are all born natural occultists in general, but our process is to de-occult this information, which means to remove the hidden, to understand what is hidden. So to understand the sciences of the physical world, understand the sciences of the universe, and to understand the psychology, the way our psychological makeup works. So that's also hidden, right? Our psychological makeup is occulted, and we have to learn these things. So the occult is not this idea of, just rituals with robes and blood sacrifices and things like this. Does it incorporate that? Yes. But it is not at its root simply exclusively that thing. It is a tool, and it depends on the wielder of that tool. It depends on the level of consciousness of the wielder of occult knowledge. So I can use that knowledge from nature to either enhance the quality of my life or to decrease, right? I could use it against my neighbor. I could use it against my family. I could create a power differential by occulting that knowledge from people who may need that knowledge of, let's say, trying to harvest the apple and understanding how to grow a tree in the real world, how to grow an apple tree so that we can have fruit, right? So we have this very black and white thinking, and by its nature, it is simply hidden. It's not good or evil. It's neutral until you wield it, until your behaviors are actually, being injected with that knowledge. Once you do a behavior with it, then it is determining whether it's a good outcome or bad outcome, right? So whether it's moral or immoral. So if we're using occult knowledge for dark purposes, if we're enslaving people, if we're using it to manipulate and coerce people, then obviously it's immoral and you're using it negatively, right? But it doesn't mean the occult knowledge is bad. It just means that you are using it in a bad way. Same thing with a knife. A knife is just a tool. I can use it to stab somebody, or I could use it to cut some vegetables, or maybe even save somebody's life with it. That's the same thing with occult knowledge.
Yeah, I appreciate you for moving that object around for us to look at, because some people would just take it more of a black and white approach, like you said, and that's sort of the issue in general with understanding these topics. You got to understand how to look at things from multiple angles, and not just say, and also though, not just say, oh, well, because it's ancient and occult, therefore it's mysterious and correct, and we need to incorporate it in our life somehow too. I think there's also that aspect of that kind of research as well. I mean, the work is valuable to do to learn more about our world, to learn more about how our world works. And like you brought up nature and understanding the laws of nature and its law, and why that is occulted from us. It could probably really blow that open and get into that, right? But I think the point I was kind of thinking in my head, not while you were talking, is you're doing a great job at explaining things from this side and then this side, but then you got to look at it up here and down here. And one of those down here is well, also, just because it's a mystery tradition or ancient also doesn't mean that it's correct or useful to you right now in your life either. So there's also that point. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that point, or if there's ways to misuse the information too, right? Just because you have it doesn't mean now you're suddenly that person's capable, or something, right? That's a big fallacy as well.
Well, it has this idea that the ancients cannot have imperfections in their theories, models, or understandings of nature, and that we could never advance beyond what the ancients knew, right? So just because it's old doesn't mean it's true, and just because it's new doesn't mean it's true either. What determines whether it's true is if it aligns with reality, whether it aligns with what we're actually seeing and repeating over and over and over. And that's how we know natural law is a science, because it's a repeatable thing over and over and over and over. It's an observable effect that you can go out and you can do it in your daily life, which you already do, and you will see the same result every single time, immutably. It will never change. It's going to be the same result every single time. If you go out and you violate somebody, that's going to be the result of it. Violence, somebody else is going to be harmed. Their autonomy is going to be violated. Their rights are going to be usurped. Their body is going to be, a victim of what your behaviors actually are. So yes, just because it's part of the mystery schools doesn't mean it's useful. That's why you have to filter through a lot of it. In fact, a lot of the stuff can be taken, contorted, perverted, and then used as mind control, which that's what's happened. Like in the New Age movements, we take a lot of the old Hermetic principles and then they tried to, sell it to us in the secret as the law of attraction, right?
Yeah,
A watered down version
of Hermeticism. Yeah.
Without referencing Hermeticism. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what it does is it breeds this egoism where it's like, oh, it's just about me, and it's just all this selfishness, and it's just about financial gain, and it completely negates all the spiritual aspects of the original teachings of the Hermetic principles. And so, yeah, that's a great example of how it's being used or abused, right? So abused, it's being abused. And I think it's really important to understand that it's a lot of work. You have to go in, you have to discern what is true, what is useful. And in everything else, you get rid of all the dogma, all the lies, all the deceit, and that was taking place in the mystery schools in the past. It's not like they weren't touched, it's not like magically the Rosicrucians didn't have people that had corrupted mindsets or corrupted consciousness or corrupted intentions to be in Rosicrucianism, just like with the Freemasons, just like with any mystery school, the Thelemites, Thelema, doesn't matter which one it is. The Hermeticists, it's just like with any religion as well. The Christians all think, oh yeah, my tradition is completely pure and all the other ones are bad, right? Well, that's how these ego identified people are within the mystery schools, which is like, I'm a Hermeticist and it's the most pure and everything else is bad, right? It's the same thing across the board in the world. We isolate ourselves. But I'm going to tell you, they've all been corrupted. Every single one of them. Doesn't mean they don't have good things in them that you can learn from, which you need to learn from them, but you need to understand as well that they've all been used for negative things to control people, to control the world, really. I mean, that's what we're going into is more control, full spectrum dominance. That's what they want, and this is one way of doing it, is creating this division within people's minds, and then it manifests, right, into the society. So they create controlled opposition. They use the Hegelian dialectic to manipulate people. They use a knowledge differential, which creates a power differential within the society. They withhold certain knowledge and then they flood you with other knowledge that's pretty much useless to you. And the main thing they want to keep away from you is the understanding of moral principles. Because if we unify under the principles of morality, under objective morality, then we can't be stopped. It's an impossibility. If we align with the cosmic laws, with natural law, and then from there we build forward, we build our skills, we're like the Knights of the Round Table. We all have different skills that we bring to the table to help alleviate the suffering in the world, then we can't be stopped, but they don't want people to have that knowledge. And in fact, I would say that people in the face of that knowledge, when they ignore it, that's a measure of a bad person to me, because it means you're completely apathetic. You don't care about enhancing your life. You may say you care, but you really don't. And we see this on a common level too. You're like, oh, my best friend's having a problem. And you're like, bro, here's the solution right here. Take the knowledge. And then they're like, the next week they're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and it just continues, right? And it just continues. They continue to ignore it. At some point, you just got to say, you're a bad person. That's it. You're bad because you're continuing to advocate, condone, and inflict violence upon others, through the state, through your own behaviors, through your mindset, through your emotions, all that stuff. And you got to tell them to stop. Yeah, you're ignorant. That's one of the primary sins, is ignorance of this, right? If there is such a thing as sin, it's ignorance of natural law, right? I mean, it's ignorance of moral relativism, ignorance of all this shit, because people don't even want to know what moral relativity actually is.
No,
That's the
I
thing. You
mean,
tell
they're
them,
in La La Land,
right.
We're over
The thing
here
is,
talking about this, and they're in fucking La La Land, not able to even grasp what the fuck you're saying. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. Well, it's wild too, because I talk to people about moral relativism. They are exhibiting moral relativism. They don't want to hear it. They completely
Oh
ignore it
no,
because it
why
means
would
they have to, yeah, they have to have responsibility then, right? They got to say, they got to look at themselves and say, I was wrong and I need to change my behavior. I need to change myself. I need to do shadow work, and I was wrong. The most powerful thing that you can say, I was wrong, and then the most powerful thing you can do is not do it anymore, to stop it, so that it doesn't continue. But everybody wants to be handed a silver platter with everything just given to them. They don't want to do the work, and they don't want to do the work on themselves because we're just catering to people. And I can't stand it. We're catering to people way too much, way too much, I feel. And I'll tell you what, like, you're right about, like, you have to adjust. You got to adjust the way that you talk to people, because you're not always going to get through to them. But for me, just my personal experience, it was the people who came in when I was being a dipshit, and said, you need to stop doing that. That were my best friends. They were the people who really cared. The people who said, I won't be around you until you stop doing that, because you need to get yourself checked. I will help you get yourself checked. But if you don't stop, I can't be around you. I got my healthy boundary. You got to cut it out immediately. You see the harm you're doing, you need to fucking stop it. And sometimes you need that. You need a strong masculine energy to come in and be like, don't do it anymore. It's done. Just nip it in the bud. Just stop. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. It worked for me, very thankfully, of that, for those people who
speaking
came
of
there.
like reading symbolism, like, yeah, look at what's happening. We're getting our asses kicked. We're creating a completely tyrannical world that is manifested through our behaviors. And so,
Yes.
like that, look what happens when we're ignorant and ignore these things. This is what we're going to get. And so, in a way, that's that male figure going to come kick our ass, is just the results that we're going to get when we build a techno-communist utopia,
That's right.
And enjoy the results of that. Yeah, that's exactly where we're headed. So we're gonna get to know what that's like to say, yeah, you done fucked up, and now here's your situation that you're in. Not somebody who's kindly telling you to avoid where you're headed, but no, you're in it now. So now you get to enjoy what that's like, and we're there,
deal with it.
and we're headed worse into that. So that's another reason why both of us are here having this conversation. You're a great dude. I want to get to know you more, but it's also like this is part of the effort to put out and get people aware of these things so they could start to do that work themselves. If they're not, already doing that work, then it's time to get in action and do the work. And if you need to hear it, then here's people, that are putting that effort into their lives and doing that work on themselves and getting a positive result, telling you that it's not as difficult as you think to get started. And there's a lot of people like Brandon, then people that I'm going to have come on the show that are doing work that are helping the world to awaken to what's been hidden from us. And we can avoid, it's still always a choice. Like, I'm not just a total black-pilled person that thinks we're headed into total destruction and disaster. It's kind of headed that way.
Right.
But we can actually turn the boat around. And every day that we wake up, we have a choice as what we're going to do to spend our time to make that decision. And we're making it every day. And that's something people don't really realize. They're sleepwalking into this future, not realizing that they're at the wheel. You're at the wheel of a car, whether you realize it or not. You probably should wake up and realize that you're at the wheel of a car and you're the one driving it. And so there's nothing that's going to change for the better unless those things are done, unless people realize that. And nobody is here to just help us fix this shit and turn it all around. Like you're talking about this figure. Well, that person might not be there, and they're not going to be there for you later in your life at times. Right. So it's it's all about taking responsibility and using discernment for what you're allowing into your life. I like how you said that about, being very discerning on someone was discerning with you. Hey, you're fucking up. Well, if there's people around you doing that, like maybe it's just time to cut them out and not spend time with them.
That's right.
And that's the way you're showing them, like, look, we're not on the same path. And you can you can live that as an example. You don't even have to have the conversation, right? It's just how you live your life is the example of like the person that you're trying to be is not going to bow down or stoop to the level of the garbage.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people you have to be the living definition of freedom or liberty, because the word freedom is very ambiguous for a lot of people because they want to nitpick about semantics of terms. Well, use the word liberty. I don't even care. Like we were talking about anarchy earlier. I don't care what you call it. You can call it whatever you want. I just know the etymology of it, the Greek etymology of it. All right. It just simply means no masters. That's it. No rulers, no masters, no slavery. And in turn, that means freedom. Doesn't matter to me what you call it. You can call it freedom. You can call it liberty. You can call it volunteerism. I don't care what kind of word that you associate with it, as long as the result, what it actually is that condition that we're saying it is. So if we say it's freedom, but it's not freedom and it's actually slavery, then I have an issue with that. But if we say it's liberty and it is freedom, and it is actually,
it's like you're saying, it's all dual. Freedom can be dual. Freedom can mean legal franchise freedom,
right?
By a constitution and by people that regulate it. So
yes,
and it's like, well, no, that's not what it means. Well, in one way it does, because those are the law that the man's law that it is enforced on everybody, whether you want to agree that that's going to be enforced on you or not. I think people understand what I'm saying. That freedom constitutionally means something different than what you're saying. And anarchy can mean something different depending. I know that's a very touchy way to say it, like I just said it, but I have issues with all the labels personally.
Right.
I'm willing to deploy them, and I understand what you mean, where you're coming from. And I'm not like, oh, I'm going to bring Brandon up and have a discussion about a word and really get into it. I'd be happy to go there, because I think there is a way to get my point across on. It's more about, I don't think we necessarily need to wear the labels. And I think when you do that, in a way, it's like limiting your message in a way, because you're threading a needle through a smaller gap now in some people's minds. That's just my take. And I feel like there's a way to use, like I was talking about the bridge and deploying the payload across the bridge. There's a way to build the bridge without as abrasive as an approach to some people's minds. That's the level that I want to work at, because I want to try to get the message across without having to break through all these barriers that I've come up against over the years, right? But when you're saying it, you're incorporating the natural law anarchy. No masters, no slaves, under natural law. Right, so it's not no rules.
Absolutely. Yeah, no.
So that's why I just rather say under natural law, because
right.
To me, it's like, if that's the tagline, then it's not. Then it's just under natural law. But I totally understand. No masters, no rulers. It's saying in man, right? There's no authority in human beings that we're going to respect. It's not legitimate. Anyone who's claiming that it is making a false claim that's not legitimate just because you accept the claim. It doesn't then what do you mean? We have a hierarchy over here that works just fine and we all agree to it. Okay, what doesn't make it correct, and if it's harming people, right? And we look at communist regimes, and the outcome of this line of thinking ends up to massive destruction every fucking time. What a surprise, right? Why weren't we taught about the Soviet Union in school and more focus on Germany?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, the labels are just less of a label. Like, I always find issues as soon as I try to wear the label, and then my mind is like, well, what about this aspect and this? And I understand, like, well, here's the true definition, and here's the one we're going to try to drive home. And I'm all about it. Let's, I think there's a lot of room for debate. If you've watched any of the work I've done, I'm questioning all this stuff, and I'm not looking to start fights with people in this community. I'm trying to be the continuous, well, here's one way to look at voluntarism that's problematic. And if we can't do that and we say, oh no, it's only this way and you're wrong. Okay, well, that's not a dialogue of understanding everything you've explained up to this point. It's all dualistic. It can have a dual meaning. It can be deployed in people's minds to mean one thing and it really means another thing, or it can be the opposite. And so, anyway, sorry to go on the tangent there about labels. But
no, I appreciate it. And I always try to stick away from labeling myself as certain things. Every once in a while I will, just to drive a point home. But for the most part, generally, I'm not going to go out and just start labeling myself, especially socially. One thing is as we were talking, like adaptability. If I recognize that somebody has a predisposition against the word anarchism, and usually you can gauge somebody pretty well, I won't use that term. I'll use a different term. And then maybe eventually, through a Socratic method or something like this, get to a term like anarchy and just be like, yeah, it means the same thing. That's it. Doesn't mean you got to use it. Doesn't mean anything. It just means that. But as you were talking about, there are polysemantic words. There's polysemantic definitions, meaning they can have two different definitions simultaneously. That is true. And we also have to understand something extremely crucial is that our languages have been controlled. Not only have they degraded, but also they've been obfuscated, right? So in this can control the way that we think because we think in words. So if you can control the meaning and the contexts of the way the words are being used socially and in a social dynamic, then you can control the way people are thinking and feeling about those terms and how they emotionally respond when other people use whether the term is being used correctly or not correctly. The other thing is that because we're social creatures, we naturally kind of organically play with words and we create our own phonetics and phonetic variants of words, and we start to create slangs and different definitions based upon the environment that we're in. If you live in the hood, you live in a place of poverty, you live in any kind of different environment, you're going to see a culture grow up around that, and they'll have their own language, right? They'll have their own terminologies that may mean something completely different than the way that you were raised on that term. The term is just a representation of a meaning, and that's the important part, is that we're understanding the meaning behind what we're talking about. And we also have to understand that, guess what? A lot of these things have been altered and controlled from outside sources to control us, right? To control our behavior in society so that we do become emotionally identified and emotionally lash out at other people when they use terms that we do not like. Thus, we get the censorship police. Thus, we get the censorship little person in our own head. Like, I can't say that, that somebody's going to get offended, right? And I got to walk on eggshells around everybody now. And the next thing you know, words are completely being obliterated from history, just completely wiped out. It literally is word burning, It's like book burning, but you're just burning the words in people's minds through their own culture. And it's easy to do that. Yeah, I mean, you can get in small groups with people and you can just start injecting things. You go to a party or something like that, make up a really cool term that people really like, give them a crazy meaning about it, and then watch it spread, right? Watch it spread. And then start talking to people about words that they normally use and inject, discord in the way they think about it, right? Inject confusion into the way they think about that word. Next thing you know, it's going to spread like wildfire. It's insane the way that you can do these things when you understand the tactics of the dark occultists, and these are the tactics that are being used against us. So yeah, I like what you said. I think it's really good. I really like what you said about volunteerism, because I always say that volunteerism is not always pragmatic. You're not always going to get the best results with people, like, let's say, voluntary labor, right? Just because you have people coming in voluntarily doing it doesn't mean that the outcome is going to be very pragmatic or
Right.
very good, you know. But at the same time, what I mean by voluntarism, same thing I mean by anarchism. It means not using coercion to force other people to give me their product of labor or to force them to do product of labor for me, right? So to force their labor in the places that they would not voluntarily consent to on their own, right? And morally consent to specifically. So
Right.
I think that's very important to define these things because
Yeah, I understand.
there's so much. Oh, I know you do. I know you do.
Oh no, like just the meaning, like with voluntarism, like, you know, there's the intent behind what you just explained, that you want relationships to be, you know, non-coercive. You don't want someone threatening force against you. That's not a relationship, right? Now, are we going to have to deal with that in our lives right now? Yes. Like the world that we go out into is not going to be like that. But then the way that I'm spinning it is like, well, then there's your ability to respond to the situation as it is. That's voluntary still. So you always have that voluntary choice on how you're going to respond to any given situation, even if you're in a cage. And then also like flipping it around, like you said, like this poly etymology, or what was the word you used? Poly definition?
Polysemantic.
Polysemantic meaning of, let's say, a military soldier who volunteers himself for the military, right? So, I mean, there's the mind control, there's the advertising, there's the propaganda, there's the video games, there's everything that led him up to that point in life where he decided to do that. The opportunity, which is a lot of young men are looking for, is like, give me a challenge, and I want to be challenged, and I want to go where the masculine men are, and I want to, you know, then I'm gonna be successful in my life because I'm gonna learn from that, right? Like that's sort of their motive. But whatever their motive is, they volunteer for this situation, right? Well, so in that case, like, well, where's voluntarism's more moral principles coming into play here? But so once they sign the contract, at that point, you know, it's their volunteering has now put themselves in a situation where they're under a contract where people are going to try to hold them to that in court and all these other systems that are set up to enforce such a thing, right? So you've put yourself in a situation just like I would do if I go get hired somewhere and they tell me, well, here's the contract. Here's exactly what's going to happen. Here's how you'll be paid. Here's what we're going to take out and give to the government in the form of taxes. Automatically, now every day if I wake up and I agree to that contract, I'm volunteering, right? It's not someone forcing me to do it. So that's where I'm like, okay, there's holes. I get it as a platform. I get it as a way to say I'm this, not that, with volunteerism.
Yes.
But then there's all this problematic stuff to the point where I'm like, I'm just removing that one because it's too problematic. And if we're not willing to look at it from multiple ways and say, well, Tyler, you're full of shit and you're wrong, I don't see it that way. Yeah, but you can see what I'm saying, though, right? Like those are valid points on what voluntary behavior is as well. So to me, it makes the term problematic, you know?
Yeah, they definitely, that is a great example of that. I think the important part underneath that is to understand whether the contract that you are involved in is actually a legitimate one or not, because there are illegitimate contracts. So for example, for the military person, maybe it's completely laid out that you're going to go to the Middle East and shoot women and children. Still not a legitimate contract.
Totally.
Because it violates another person's autonomy that was not voluntarily part of that contract, right? Now, if two people sign up and they want to duel in the street and they sign a contract for it, I got no problem with it. They want to go out there and they want to shoot each other bloody in the middle of the street. All right, whatever, you know, they can do that, right? That's fine. But as soon as you're putting other people in the position that they are being harmed because of your contracts, because of your voluntary behavior, then it's not legitimate. Then it's immoral.
Yeah. It's not voluntary for those people. Yeah.
Right.
It's not voluntary for the person getting a bomb dropped on their head. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so it's a very complex thing. So you have to look at it holistically. You know, you have to look at these concepts holistically when it comes to these terms. And it always comes back to this. Are other people's liberties being destroyed because of your behavior? okay, then you're not allowed to do that, period. You can do
Yeah,
that,
it's not a
but
right.
under natural law, you don't have the right to do that. It's not a right,
Right.
inevitably, no matter what, eternally, not a right. It's not because I say it's that.
Yeah,
It's
but what
because the
you just said
results.
is so problematic for the statist mind because they don't understand morality. So you
Right,
you
right,
mentioned
right.
that earlier. I noted it down. They've occulted morality. They've occulted natural law. Probably the two biggest and most important occult topics because they would allow us to take responsibility to then become actually free through taking
Right.
that responsibility. But we don't because we don't see that as a moral problem, what you just explained. Like if the government does it and I was the one that pulled the trigger, I was just told, that's what I'm supposed to do. So that's
Right.
the gap. And that's where most people give a pass for some reason to the state and what they do and carry out. But what you just said is 100% correct. Even if I'm not perfect for saying that, and even if you're not perfect for recognizing it, it doesn't make it less true. And I think that's another
Right.
big issue people have, and they will come and find themselves in the comments finding some issue with me, finding some issue with you, and making the
Yes.
fallacy of shooting the messengers here who are not claiming to be perfect for recognizing and working on ourselves. I'm not perfect. I'm on a path that is not done yet, not anywhere near that. I'm just getting started, really, is the way I look at it. So if I'm
Absolutely.
perfect, then that's a big problem. And because I understand certain things, I'm not able to communicate it because I'm not perfect, like that's another big problem, right? But again, now I'm talking over here where we're at, going back to people not even understanding that what a military man does under orders is actually his moral responsibility and culpability no matter what the contract says. But in most people's minds, there's a pass there because he was told to do that. And this is, basic shit that we should have established up to this point by now, that it's not a moral right to take someone else's life that's not yours because you were given the order to. It sounds silly to say it, but this is what's going on. And
It
this
is
is what
silly to
people's
say it.
position is. That's what people's position
Yeah.
is.
Well, you can't delegate wrongs because you don't have the right to do them. So I can't give over to a representative or give over to my neighbor or my friend the right to go and violate another person, thus as my other neighbor as an example, right? I can't go to my best friend and be like, hey, I'm going to delegate this ability to you, this power, this force, right, over to you. And you're going to go as my representative to my neighbor and steal 20% of his product of labor, right? Or 20% of his private property, right? I can't do that. I mean, I can do it, but it's not legitimate in nature as a moral behavior. Yeah, he can go and the effects will be real, but the legitimacy of the morality of it is not there. And I think this is where people have a big separation, is that they don't look at the consequences of things. They don't want personal responsibility. We nailed that. And one way they avoid that is by not recognizing and being aware of consequences, because that's where the science comes into it. People don't think of behavioral outcomes as a methodology of understanding science of behaviors. There's a science there of cause and effect. When I do a certain behavior, I get this outcome from that, right? If I continue to do that behavior, then the outcome is the same, right? Then I now have a scientific model from that to understand that if I do it again, it's probably going to be the same thing over and over and over and over. So I'm not recognizing I have a disconnect from the cause into the effect, right? And we're not associating those things, because if we did, then we have to look back at ourselves and say, oh man, I actually caused that. And, I need to take responsibility for it. That's part of this idea of becoming empowered, becoming self-aware, becoming more conscious, is being able to look at your behaviors and see the outcome from them and say, did I really mean to do that? Is that something I would like to see in the world? Am I in right? Am I moral in this behavior? And in correcting those things when they're not. We're always trying to build and enhance our own lives, like you're talking about. I'm not perfect. I strive and thrive for some sort of perfection, but it will never happen in the physical world. But I think it's something that you should look towards as a process, to continue to enhance yourself, right? But there's really no such thing as perfection. Real perfection is the process of imperfection getting better and better and better and better and better. And that's the process of you enhancing and raising yourself and ascending your consciousness into higher planes and your behaviors so that they don't, violate other beings. That's what it all comes down to. You're not really awake until your, comprehension and your behaviors are in alignment with not violating other people's liberties. That's real spiritual illumination. Anything that teaches you that it's not that at all is completely dogmatic, and it's completely a manipulatory tactic to get you stuck in selfishness, egoism, moral relativism, and potentially even solipsism. It's a God complex. That's what all statism is. It's a God complex. It's us trying to say that we get to be God over everything on the planet. We get to arbitrate law. We get to be the lawmakers, and we get to control everybody in that dynamic, right? We get to arbitrate all of their lives because we are God. In an oligarchy, in a technocratic control system, an occultocracy, you could even call it, controlled by the hidden. It's ridiculous to see that so many people don't connect what's actually taking place physically in the realm of effects to the mental plane of causality, to see that all of the things that we're seeing that are playing out in the world and have played out in the world are all coming individually from within our own minds, and that we're all culpable at some level for continuously condoning and amplifying that condition. And luckily there's people like us, taking a step back and be like, whoa, we need to change that. I need to check myself. I need to get out of this. I need to stop doing these things and recognizing this stuff. And it takes a lot of work, and I always tell people one reason why slavery is so hard to get over is because it's been epigenetically programmed into us. We've been epigenetically engineered, right, over a long period of time to think that slavery is a good thing. So even every cell of our biology responds negatively to us being free, like truly free, because all of our cells, it's just like you put your cells in a petri dish and they adapt to whatever that environment is, right? So epigenetics is this idea of the adaptability of the environment. So as the environment changes, your gene expression changes. So epi means beyond, and genes mean to create, obviously. So genus, or to generate something, right? So it means that we're not controlled by our genes as much as we used to think we were, that it's more so the signal of the environment that we're in that stimulates the expression of that gene or not. So just because you have a gene for, let's say, like a cancer or an illness, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have that illness take place if you are in a healthy environment. Now take that and apply it societally to this idea of dogmatic authority and governments and states and, and coercion and all this stuff. Now we've been epigenetically conditioned to accept that. So whenever you're trying to free somebody, every cell is screaming at that person to not do that. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize that. That's why it's so fucking hard sometimes.
Which is speaking to a survival mechanism. So you're triggering something in them that means being outcast from the group, which could mean death, right? Not necessarily anymore. That's right. But it used to mean that. So, yeah, not only is it consciously engineered by the dark occult, but also in just the group dynamic, right? If you think too differently, you're not allowed to sit at the dinner table and around the fire at night because you're a weirdo.
That's right.
Well, what if you're correct and everybody else is wrong, So that's the issue. Then, you all end up sacrificing babies at the top of the mountain at night and throwing them in the fire pit or whatever, right? But the guy was trying to tell you this was not a good idea, guys, but he got outcasted. So it goes both ways, right?
It does.
Now we have to have some bravery and be able to use our voices to get this information out. And I really jive with everything you just said. I wish I could pick holes in it, but I tend to agree with what you were saying, and that the more we can morally align ourselves with nature and its law and truth, and speak in truth, and live in truth, and speak with power, and be courageous in that endeavor. First of all, have fun if you're starting that journey, and good luck.
Yep.
And also, that's, I think, part of the answer to my question for you, as I think we should start to wrap up, because I know you're in the middle of your day and your week and your life and your family and everything there, and you've done a terrific job, and everybody should check Brandon's work out if they want to get more context on what he's saying here. It's not just some wild rant he went on. He's got a lot of good research and information to back this up. But to end slavery, Brandon, that you pointed out and drawn a good picture for us why we're enslaved and how, but what will it take to get out of that condition?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of doomers and people who really think that there's no way out of it, that we're completely stuck perpetually in this system. And I happen to not be one of those people. You may listen to me and think, oh, yeah, like, this doesn't inspire any hope in me. But if you really listen, you'll see that I'm coming from a place of a really holistic love. And I'm coming from this place of real care, where I'm trying to, really alleviate the bondage that we're all, experiencing. And to get out of slavery, it has to be a paradigm shift. It has to be a collective, at least enough numbers, a quantum paradigm shift in consciousness, which then results in that condition changing in reality, right? So we have to meet the requirements to get the thing that we say we want. And those requirements are set up in the framework of natural law. And one of those things happens to be living in alignment with objective morality. We cannot have slavery if we're constantly arbitrating morals on the whims of our own perception, and despite the negative results of the actions and the consequences. So if we want to live in a free world, we have to live in a way that manifests freedom for ourselves and for others, meaning that we cannot transgress upon other people's autonomy, upon other people's sovereignty. We can't steal their private property, and their body and their consciousness and their mind are all forms of private property, and it's all form of their autonomy. So we have to live in harmony with morality. So I always say, which comes from many other great researchers, that there is a law, which is natural law, and this law is the law of freedom as well. It's called the law of freedom, which means that as a society or as a species lives in harmony at the aggregate level with more moral principles, as they're manifesting more actions that do not violate other people, there is less slavery in that system, in that framework, and vice versa, meaning as a society that lives in harmony with immoral principles, immoral behaviors, and there's more behaviors being manifested in a society that are violating other people, then the natural condition of that will be slavery by de facto. It might not be intentional slavery, but if you have a whole community that's just stealing from each other, you are, in extension, claiming ownership over people's bodies by taking their private property. At some level, you are saying, well, I can take this. This is mine. I know it's not mine, but I can take it. Since I can get it, now it's mine. But in extension of that, you're limiting somebody else's freedom on that with their body and their consciousness of how they can operate with, let's say, such item, right? Such private property. And thus, now you've created a condition where their freedom has been limited. And that's what slavery really is. It's on a spectrum, It really is on a spectrum. There's a place where like just normal theft is slavery. And then there's a place where murder is the absolute pinnacle of slavery, And then there's a place in between where it's like chattel slavery, right? Where you're just like working and your product of labor is demanded from another, and you'll be whipped and chained and, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's another place, which is taxation, right? Which is, economic slavery. And it's all in there. It's all forms of slavery. But, You could say it's just all slavery or not, and you can say that, but the theft is a little bit less harmful than obviously the murder, period. No matter what, everybody knows that. Would you rather have your Xbox stolen or your video game or your TV stolen, your computer, compared to murder? Well, obviously so, but we would all rather not have any of that happen, right? So we want to live in harmony with behaviors that are conducive to the way that we want to see the world. So be the change that you want to see in the world by living in harmony with moral principles. And if you need to do the due diligence to understand what objective morality is, then do the research. Don't be lazy about it. Kick yourself in the ass, get online, start researching, start studying philosophy, start studying epistemology, etymology, metaphysics, logic, morals, ethics, all this stuff. Study these things, read the literature, and also look around you and observe the effects of your behaviors and other people's behaviors, and you'll see it. It's readily available for all of us. And it's only due to our own ignorance and our own programming that we've done to ourselves that we are not getting that condition. And what I'm talking about is not some utopia. I want to make that very clear. Doesn't mean there aren't going to be thugs or people trying to steal from you or trying to coerce you in the streets or something like this. It just means that the whole system is not set up to amplify that kind of behavior. The whole system doesn't enshrine that principle as a means of creating quote unquote order in society and create a civilized world, which it's not order and it's not civilized. And we can readily see that because the axioms, the foundational principles are completely corrupt. And this is what we get. We're getting exactly what we're putting into the system for a reason, because we're not living in harmony with, these objective truth and objective morals and just principles in general. So yeah, I think that's the only way, is by getting to enough people that they start to change their behavior and they live in harmony with this and they start to display this. They become the living definition of freedom themselves and they start putting it out into the world. It doesn't mean everybody has to do it, because we know that that's not true. But you can get enough people to make a change. That's for sure. And that's why I do the work I do. I know that's why you do a lot of the work that you do, because we understand that we have to help to change the minds of other individuals to make a change in the world. That's it. If we don't change the minds, then nothing else is going to change, and that's all we really can do at this moment, and I think that's the best, most efficient model and pragmatic model, and also moral model that we can go down at this path without going to real extremes that we really don't want to put on the table yet. And people aren't ready for that yet, and even so, we probably wouldn't be, it wouldn't be a winning battle at that point. So we need to really understand that education of this is vital. It's vital. It's absolutely vital to get through to people. Consciously raising children, right? I think that's a great place to start. Consciously raising your kids if you have them, or even help other people consciously raise their kids if you are in the position to do so. Inspire them, teach them these things. I think that's a beautiful way to do this work.
Well said. Yeah, philosophy, the love of wisdom, right? So becoming in love with the idea of becoming more knowledgeable. Obviously, it sounds pretty simple. It's in itself, right? And then that in turn makes you a better person to approach parenting. If you're a steward over people, a parent, someone who's in that responsibility, yeah, now you have such a powerful opportunity in front of you, or you could totally screw it up, right? And not produce something that's going to make the world better at all, and then do the opposite. So that's a good point. And anything else that you want to share, or where people can find your work? Any final thoughts that you'd like to speak into the stream?
Yeah, you can find my work at seedtruth.com. That's my main website. And from there, there's a bunch of other links on there to like the One Great Work Network. You can find my work there. You can find my socials from there, Instagram and Facebook. And I'm always trying to share something informative And also, I'm always open to, doing discussions with people, interviews, podcasts, stuff like that. I try to keep my schedule pretty open for the most part for things like this. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to be on here with you, Tyler. I love seeing your face. I know we've never met in person, but it does feel like we're spiritual kindred at some level. And the way that we met each other and came together, and all the help that you brought to the table has been for the Seed Conference, and everything that you're doing has just been amazing. And I just want to give you a personal thank you for that as well. And I hope that you continue to do well in your own family and your own personal life, man.
I got more questions, so I think, I'd like to have you back on, because there's now I need to go back and reweave. I have so many questions that get left out of these conversations, and it's hard. There's topics that you want to delve into, but it's going to take it over here, and you don't have the time. I love the challenge, but you brought up Doug. I wanted to talk about Doug. You brought up some other things that I want to get into. So I think we should continue the conversation. And I also, at the end there, when I was saying, if you're a parent, you have this opportunity, everybody has the opportunity, and everybody has the opportunity to parent others and mentor them through this means. I've had so many mentors, whether they're parents or not, mentor me to be able to understand things better. So I just want to make that clear, that I didn't mean to say or make it sound like, well, if you're a parent, you have this great opportunity, and then people that aren't parents oh, well, what about me? Or
what about me?
What an asshole. Why did he leave us out? Yeah. And it's that's not, I'm coming, obviously, from my perspective, we were talking about parenting.
Yes.
Brandon brought it up again at the end. So everyone can be a teacher and mentor. And in fact, if you don't have children, maybe anything that might be feeling like it's lacking in that area for you because of that, whether it is or not, I don't want to put feelings in people's minds. If you don't feel that way, fine. But maybe you feel like you do want to fill a gap that maybe your non-parent life has brought you. Well, there's a great opportunity here in this world for teaching people and passing down wisdom. And it doesn't take, I'm physically trying to get fit, but I can sit here and do this and speak and teach and provide information to people without much physical effort. It is a lot of effort to prepare for something like this. Yeah, you don't have to do it in the way we're doing it. We have this tool. Most people aren't using in a way that's effective, right? They can just pull this out and start. You got the mic, you got the camera. Everything's working pretty good nowadays on these. So yeah, step up and let's try to help the younger generations get some information from inspiring people, which, could be a lot more of us. Like Brandon said, it doesn't need to be all of us, but, it's a good time to question, am I someone who's not doing anything about the problem? It was a good workout, and I know we're going to be talking to each other, so I'll talk to you soon, and appreciate you for coming on as well.
Okay, Tyler, it's been amazing to be on here, and very excited. Just keep me updated, and I'll come back on whenever you'd like. And thank you for the opportunity again.
Awesome.
Merkabra.